Welcome back to PatBar LSAT Prep. In this video, we begin our presentation of Section 4 of PrepTest 76. This is the second of two logical reasoning sections, which will combine for about half your total score. There are several types of questions. Some may involve flaws in reasoning, assumptions, contradictions, or applications of a principle. They may require that you find the best possible answer or the only possible answer. They may require that you find the closest parallel to the presentation, find the conclusion that strengthens it or weakens it, or that proves that the conclusion logically follows the presentation. In the latter case, only one of the possible responses will guarantee this. If it does not, it is wrong. Question 1 involves a statement by Aisha that Vadim will be laid off work because while Vadim does exemplary work, Vadim is a programmer. The firm is going to lay off a programmer, and the firm's policy is that the most recent such hire in this situation has to go. You must find the assumption under which the conclusion follows logically. If you read the passage carefully, the correct answer should jump off the page. If the most recent hire is the programmer to go, and Vadim has to go, the assumption must be that Vadim is the most recent such hire. Without it, the conclusion does not follow logically. Question 2 presents Wanda's explanation of why there are so many items in her art studio, and Vernon's rebuttal asking whether Wanda is inspired by laundry and trash. You are instructed to find the answer that most accurately expresses the principle driving Vernon's response. A is simply wrong, because Vernon is talking about inspiration, not health. It can't be C, because Vernon is directly asking Wanda if she's inspired by these items, not offering an opinion as to whether they should inspire her. You must recognize this distinction. The LSAT will be testing it with regularity. And that's the same problem with E. Here's should be again. And on top of that, this is not what Vernon is rebutting. Wanda is arguing against stark and empty. Vernon is arguing against laundry and soda bottles. We're not told how he feels about anything else in there. D is tempting, but problematic. Vernon is equating good writing with items to stimulate good writing. And there's nothing here suggesting that good stimuli cannot be messy. Vernon thinks laundry and trash are bad, and D is incorrect. Which leads directly to the correct answer, that Vernon is suggesting that Wanda have better quality items to stimulate her. B is the proper response. Question 3 presents a problem. That while the listing of endangered species leads to the enforcement of legal protections for those species, the populations have then declined even more rapidly in some cases. So, which of the answers, if true, does the most to explain this problem? It is important to remember when dealing with a paradox that something will not make sense on its face until you find the one thing that says unequivocally, "Oh, that would explain it." For example, it's reasonable to assume that a listing of an endangered species can take many years, but that does literally nothing to explain what happened following such a listing. A is incorrect. B doesn't address the problem, because we're told only that some species saw a faster decline after their listing, not which species. C would answer a different problem. If there are more species to protect, it may be more difficult to stop a population decline, but it doesn't explain an increase. E is just wrong. Poachers unable to find a specific species to target would tend to be an effect of the increased decline in their numbers, not a cause. If, on the other hand, the endangered designation were to lead poachers to target a species because collectors want something, that would explain a more rapid decline, and D is correct. Question 4 presents a disagreement. Annette says Sefu should take town councilors on a trip in support of a development plan. Sefu says that trip could be seen as improper influence. If you stick to what they say, you'll avoid falling into trap answers like E. There is exactly one point on which they disagree: whether the trip should occur. B is the correct response. Question 5 presents a scholar who suggests that recent changes in religious texts and rituals have been followed by increases in attendance at these religions' places of worship, and concludes that any such modernization will have the same effect. You are to find the flaw based on insufficient justification. The scholar's reasoning can be outlined simply as X happened and Y happened, therefore X caused Y, and more X will cause more Y. This is a classic correlation versus causation problem, and it doesn't matter if not every religion can do it, because it doesn't affect the scholar's conclusion. Likewise, any alteration of the message in texts and rituals does not speak to the flaw in the scholar's X caused Y conclusion. The scholar argues that X caused Y means more X will cause more Y, not that it's the only way. Irreversible growth? The author doesn't suggest any such thing, and if something is not in the presentation, it cannot be the flaw. Remember what the scholar is arguing. X caused Y, therefore more X will cause more Y. What's missing is the correlation, that X caused Y. Without the detail necessary to show this, the justification is insufficient, and that is the flaw. Question 6 also deals with flawed reasoning. In this case, you're to find the answer with the same flaw that exists within the presentation, so we must identify that precise flaw. We're told you either have to be very talented or practice very hard to be in the regional band. And that is the reason that the very talented Lily does not practice hard. It assumes that if she possesses one requirement, that possession alone is the reason she doesn't need the other. Or, put another way, that the possession of one somehow causes the lack of the other. So, A is wrong because its flaw is, if one causes the other, then we will see the other today. B also presents the wrong flaw, that if X isn't true, therefore neither can Y be. C too presents a different flaw, that if the conditions are right that something might happen, therefore it will happen. Also offering a different flaw is E, that if X is to happen, Y or Z must be true, and if Y isn't, Z must be. We're not told that X must happen, which the passage requires. This is why D is correct. Staying informed about current events must happen, either by X, the newspaper, or by Y, the national TV news. And X must be the cause that it's not Y. That is the identical flaw. Question 7 features a dietitian arguing that eating fish can lower cholesterol, and who presents in support a study suggesting a change in average cholesterol levels among one of two groups taking part. The dietitian says the two groups had similar cholesterol levels before the study. So your task is find the answer best describing the role played by that statement in the argument. Here's a case where putting the dietitian's argument in your own words may help. So let's try this. One group had lower average cholesterol levels than the other after the study, but they had similar levels before the study, so there was a change, and it must have been the fish. That's the key. The statement is there to illustrate the change, or in other words, to support that there is a change, not to object to it. A is incorrect. The conclusion already was expressed. This statement is offered as an illustration. The statement does offer background information, but that fails to state its purpose to support the conclusion. D is incorrect. E is just wrong, because there is no alternative explanation, which is exactly why C is correct. By presenting the statement that the group's levels were similar before the study, it would rule out the alternate explanation that these different levels were pre-existing. Question 8 presents the argument that satellite navigation systems save fuel and promote safety. In support, the passage cites studies showing that satnavs allowed drivers to reach new destinations with fewer miles driven, and that drivers using them drove more carefully by not consulting paper maps. So, which answer, if it's true, most strengthens the argument? Again, with a strengthen the argument question, the wrong answers would either weaken the argument or provide no effect either way. The studies cited in the passage refer to people already using satnavs, not to those who are likely to. A does not address the conclusion. B might have an effect except that the studies specifically refer to satnavs' benefit in reaching new destinations, as opposed to just any destination. We are not given the data that would support B. C makes no sense, since it refers to drivers going to new locations who plan their trips in advance, and therefore not using satnavs. If we assume that drivers who own satnavs instead use their customary routes to their familiar destinations, again it doesn't affect the argument, because that pattern isn't addressed in the passage. The conclusion was based on statistics specific to new destinations. D is incorrect. If you had eliminated E, you fell into a trap. It is the only answer addressing safety. All the others suggested fuel consumption, but the studies cited in the passage directly support promoting safety by keeping your eyes on the road. And if we assume that this leads to fewer course changes or unsafe maneuvers, this does indeed strengthen the conclusion. Question 9 presents the argument that neither threats nor financial rewards from a manager will lead to the best performance from employees. Rather, that employees must learn to want to do the best work for its own sake, which, according to the passage, is learned when managers delegate responsibility. You're given 5 propositions. One is most closely illustrated by the passage. This question may require that you divorce yourself from personal experience. Maybe you did respond best to threats. Maybe you did respond best to financial rewards. Forget that. The correct proposition must follow the given facts. So again, the facts as presented. Threats don't motivate. Financial rewards don't motivate. Employees do their best work when they are motivated to want to. Managers facilitate that motivation by delegating responsibility. So maybe increased responsibility can improve your sense of how to use power, but that doesn't speak to your motivation to do your best job. The desire for prestige is irrelevant if we're confined to delegation begets motivation begets performance. Just the facts. E is simply wrong. If harnessing self-interest to benefit the company was valid in terms of the argument, then the threat of termination would be valid. Same with the promise of more money. The passage says it's best that workers conform instead to the good job as its own reward ideal. D has nothing to do with motivation. It's specific only to decision-making. We're looking for an illustration of delegation leads to motivation leads to performance, and this only illustrates that the best position may lead to the best decisions. If a manager partially relinquishes control, that is, delegates it, and it enhances or motivates one's effectiveness or performance, that illustrates our entire fact set and is the correct response. In our next video, we will present questions 10 through 18 of Section 4 of Prep Test 76.